Bible. We are listening to the stories from the book of 1 Samuel. Samuel anoints Saul as king. 1 Samuel chapters 8 to 10. We have called the story you have last heard, the last of the judges. But actually, there were two other judges in Israel when Samuel was a very old man. These were his two sons, Joel and Abijah. But just like Eli's sons long before, they were bad men. They were greedy, and instead of judging honestly, they took bribes. The people were very unhappy about this. So one day, the elders went to see Samuel and said to him, "You are an old man now, and your sons are not judging in the way you did. All the nations around about have kings. Appoint a king to rule over us too." Samuel was very sad about this. So he went to talk to God about it in prayer. God answered his faithful old servant and explained to him that the people were not really turning against Samuel but against God himself. Samuel must listen to what they said, but he must explain to them exactly what it would mean if they had a king in the way the heathen nations did. They would have to supply young men constantly for the king's army. They would have to give others to work in his workshops, making arms and armor. Some again would have to work on the king's lands, reaping his harvests, and the daughters of Israel would have to work in the royal kitchens. They would all be taxed and would have to give some of their cattle and sheep to the king every year. And his officials would lord it over them, and they would have to obey. Still, the people would not listen to Samuel. They must have a king so that they would be like all the other nations. When Samuel reported this to God in prayer, God told him to choose them a king. Samuel sent all the elders back to their own cities and set out to find a king for them. Now at this time there lived in the district of the tribe of Benjamin a man named Kish, who had a strong and handsome son, a tall man, head and shoulders above other people, and his name was Saul. Kish owned a number of donkeys, and these donkeys strayed away. So Saul took a servant and went to look for them. They had to travel a very long way without catching sight of the missing animals. And when in the end they reached as far as the land of Zuph, Saul decided they must turn back home in case his father began to worry about them. The servant, however, remembered that in a town nearby lived a wise man, a prophet of God, and that wise man was, of course, Samuel. He suggested that Saul should go to see Samuel and ask him for help in finding the donkeys. They turned toward the town, which must have been Ramah, and asked the young girls coming out of the town to fetch water where they would be able to find the prophet. When Saul arrived at the city gate near which Samuel was standing, God told the prophet in his heart that this was the man that must rule over his people. Saul knew nothing at all about this, and he did not know who Samuel was. He went up to him and asked him politely how to find his way to the prophet's house. How amazed he must have been at the answer he received. Samuel said, "I am the man you want. Come and eat with me today, and tomorrow you may leave again. Do not worry about the donkeys, they are found already. And for whom is all Israel longing? Is it not for you and for all your family? Saul hardly knew how to answer. Am I not a Benjaminite belonging to one of the smallest tribes of Israel? And is my family not one of the least important in Benjamin? How can you speak to me in this way? Samuel gave him no answer, but took him and his servant into the dining hall in the high place of the town, and made Saul sit in the chief seat between all the important people round about. Early the next morning, before Saul left to go back home, Samuel called him aside. The old man took a horn of oil and poured it out on Saul's head and kissed him and said, "It is the Lord himself who has anointed you to be king over his people. Now go on your way." When you come to Rachel's grave at Zilzah, just as you enter the land of Benjamin, you will see two men who will tell you that the donkeys are found and that your father is worrying in case you are now lost. Go on from there, and on the plain of Tabor you will meet three men going up to sacrifice at Bethel. One of them will be carrying 3 kids, one will have 3 loaves, and the third will carry a bottle of wine. They will greet you and give you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from them. After that, when you arrive at Gibeah, you will meet a group of prophets playing on musical instruments and prophesying in the name of God. You will see that they are filled with the Spirit of God, and the Spirit will come on you too, and you will be made a new man. All this will happen to prove to you that it is God who is calling you to be the king. Wait for me in Gilgal, and in 7 days' time I will meet you there. Everything happened exactly as Samuel had said. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul, he became a changed man. Now he was no longer just a farmer's son, but every inch a king. After a while, Samuel called a great meeting of the people of Israel at Mizpah. Tribe by tribe and family by family, they marched past him and then singled out the tribe of Benjamin. From that tribe, he called out the family of Kish, but Saul was not among them. When Samuel wondered what had happened to the young man, God told him that Saul had hidden himself among the luggage. Then men ran and fetched Saul, and when the people saw him standing there, taller than all the rest and handsome, and heard Samuel point out the new king, they all shouted, "God save the king!" Samuel reminded the people of the laws of God, which they must still keep, and explained also the laws that must control the king's ways. All this was written down in a book which was kept in the house of the Lord, and then the people returned to their homes. Now Israel had their first king, but not all the people respected him. One little group, the children of Belial, despised him, but Saul did nothing to them. Time would show whether he was fit to be king. With a little group of strong men who honored him, he went down to Gibeah to set up his palace there.